Well, thanks, Simon, for the intro, and also thanks, Simon. Simon was really one of the first people in Washington to really understand the big changes in technology and media that were really disrupting the old politics and bringing on the new. And he was the founder of the New Politics Institute, and he's been a great partner going forward here in the last couple of years. Well, one of the things we're going to do today, we take off every once in a while in a very specific kind of area, is we're going to start talking about, I'm going to walk you over here. I hope the TV folks will go with me here. Because we're going to be talking about the exploding world of political web video. And we say it that way because, indeed, we are really in an explosive kind of period right here. The amount of new innovations coming up, the amount of new players that are coming forward, it's very confusing for a lot of people, it's very kind of exciting for a lot of people. But there's a point here where we're trying to actually help the political world here in DC try to understand what's really going on out there. And what we've done is, in fact, we're going to do some framing here. I'm going to do some framing, and then we're going to put together an incredible panel here of really the pioneers and innovators in this field that can actually lay out some of the ways to actually deal with this in politics today. Now, one way we've kind of used in the past to talk about this is a lot of people in politics kind of understand what a big disruption television, broadcast television was to politics literally 40 years ago. And there's some vague analogies to what happened in the internet. I mean, television in the 50s was this goofy kind of medium, but by the early 60s, you saw this explosion of innovation in politics. And where we were using them in the televised debates, we were trying to innovate now in what at that time was a minute-long ads, the classic daisy ad where the little girl was plucking the daisy flower, and then it went into a mushroom cloud, and Lyndon Johnson's voice went in there and freaked out the whole American public on if Goldwater gets into power there, what's going to happen. And then, of course, we saw how television was actually to bring us right into these massive kind of people-powered events of that time. Now, this explosive innovation, this wasn't like obvious that this is how you were going to use television. So there was all kinds of things that we forget about that actually was going on at that time that actually just fell by the wayside, didn't work. The way to think about what's going on now with the internet and with the web is that we're in a very similar time of explosive innovation. There will be a shakeout, there will be a kind of regularization of how you do politics in this environment, and over the next cycle or two, we're going to actually see how that emerges. And once that emerges, it'll probably lock in as the way you do politics for a very long time, similar to what we did with around the television world. Now, one way to understand why is this happening now, and this is useful to think because it helps you think strategically out the next 5 years here. This is a chart we've been using a lot. And the way to think about it is there's two booms in the internet booms. And we are in the second boom, which is the broadband boom. And the broadband boom is the boom that allows you to do motion media, television, web video on it. There was a lot of people in the 90s here, this is from 90 to 2000, when they tried it in the low bandwidth internet, there were attempts to do video on the web. They were largely unsuccessful. Because the only media that could really work in that low bandwidth was anything to do with text. So all the newspapers and everybody in that environment, those media sectors, did get sucked onto the web, were disrupted by the internet. It took broadband to get over at least a third of all American homes and 50% of all businesses till we really started to see the profound kind of shakeup of the higher bandwidth media. And the first to get hit was music, which is why all those kids with Napster would send in the audio files. But ultimately, in the fall of 2005 is the way I would mark it, is when television started its massive migration to the web. Motion media, web video really began. And that was the beginning of YouTube and the rest. And what ultimately, though, is just like in the 90s and the mid-90s, if you looked ahead at that migration, the inevitability of that, we're in the same place today. We're in the middle of this decade. Just assume that this migration of all this media is moving in that direction. Start strategizing rapidly today. That's what's happening in the Valley right now, which is why we're having a huge boom in this video space. In fact, it's almost getting overheated. They're thinking there might be a second crash is going to start building up if we don't watch it. But in politics, just assume this is happening. Start strategizing now. Now, just to give you a sense of the power of this, we were going to have the guy from YouTube, actually, who's doing the politics section of YouTube, was going to be here with us through video conferencing. And just to show you how kind of disruptive this whole thing is and how crazy it was, we actually were going to link in through video conferencing to have him come in from the Valley to talk to us, but we just couldn't get through the firewall of this hotel. And so he's sitting stranded in San Francisco right now. But this is it. Early days. Eventually we'll be able to do that very seamlessly. But anyhow, this is just something to put it in context. These are the numbers for YouTube. YouTube did not exist in 2004. They only were incorporated in 2005. And by late 2005, there was 5 million videos watched a day. It is now, by the last fall, but it's still it's similar today, roughly in the same space, 100 million video streams a day are going off of YouTube. 100 million. Every single day. That doesn't mean individual users, but because some people might see 3 or 4 of them. Also, as people from around the world. But that is an amazingly huge audience. And so what you can start to say is YouTube and other sites like this have cracked how to do television on the web. Now the flip side is, who bought them? Google bought them. Why did Google buy them? Because Google has figured out how to advertise on the web. And here's just some numbers of Google, just to put it in context. Google last year made $10 billion in advertising revenue on their search ads. $10 billion. If they stay at this growth rate, which is expected, they will essentially this year surpass the ad revenue of all the broadcast television networks combined. That's the kind of size of shift that's going on in ad spend right now. And so once you can figure out how to do a new medium like web video on the web through YouTube and others, and once you figure out how to make money on the web through advertising like YouTube, you put those together and you've got a very viable medium. And this has arrived. That's why web video is here today and it is here to stay. Now we've seen how politics has started to adapt to it. And this was the first thing that really, there's been all kinds of experimental new things that happened. But this one I think is the one that really kicked and got people's attention. Last cycle, the 2006 cycle, where George Allen was actually caught in a kind of impromptu moment there saying something that others, some people thought was an offensive comment, a racially offensive comment. Well, this thing essentially went out through YouTube, as everybody in politics knows, and in fact it really had a serious impact on his campaign. We can debate how big an impact, but clearly it actually had something on disrupting a juggernaut of a campaign at that point. Now, we've also seen positive uses of this. So that's kind of the classic negative. And it's funny in these new mediums, often the negative is the first thing that really goes. Like the Mushroom Cloud Daisy ad, that's like, the world's biggest negative ad ever, right? Vote for this guy and you're all going to die. And this, but it's the same thing. The new ads, often the first things that come out are these kind of negative ways to do it, which is the macaque ad. On the other hand, we're watching a wave of innovation, particularly in the presidentials now, where we've had announcements, presidential announcements coming online. Obama, Richardson, Edwards, others. We've also seen kind of new innovation here about how to use it more interactively. In fact, we've got one of the speakers here who's going to talk about, he was actually involved in actually producing this and talking about how you can actually do that now. And anyhow, there's been very, very interesting innovation across the board of the presidentials. Well, in fact, there's been so much innovation that Dan Manat here, who's the founder and executive producer of Politics TV and a very good friend and colleague of mine, we were looking at this after a while here, and we said in the early part of this year, we thought, you know what, we've got to actually just start to categorize all the different kinds of ways that politics is starting to use this web video. And we came up with a dozen categories that we started to talk about, and we made, in fact, what else? A kind of web video of all these different categories and took some of the select best examples and put it together in about a 20-minute run. And each little category itself kind of runs as about a minute and a half, 2-minute kind of deal. Now, we're not going to show that to you today, but if you go to the New Politics site, you can actually look through that and walk you through these categories. But I will just kind of give you kind of a way to frame it before we turn this over to the folks here, our panelists. One is you've got one category, say the side, there's a cluster of categories that are essentially campaigns that are starting to evolve their campaign strategies into the web. And that's why we started to see announcement videos come out. Now, why would you do an announcement video there? In the past, in the old politics, you had to hold a press conference. You had to hope to heck the broadcast stations or the local station TV would come. They would grab one little snippet, maybe 30 seconds if you were lucky. It would be basically put out into the medium by some snide reporter who was probably going to tell you that, this guy's bound to lose, but he announced. And it was really kind of a controlled environment that was like really hard to deal with. In this environment, you can put out a 2-minute, 4-minute video. You can say whatever you want to say. People can all your supporters can come to it and see it unadulterated. The media still has to take it to kind of take their little snippet for the evening news. And in fact, people can come back again and again and again. There's all these kind of superior ways to actually deal with it. Another category is we're starting to see how Hollywood actors, particularly in the progressive circles, because they're very progressive, they're starting to actually get involved with doing these kind of mini little videos. For example, like Will Ferrell's classic one of imitating George Bush in the 2004 campaign. There's a wave of these going to start to come. There's another one we call campaign video blogs. Just like we've got text-based bloggers now, has been going around for the last few years following campaigns. Now we're going to start to see these video cameras are just going to be ubiquitous through these campaigns. You're going to start to see behind the scenes or the kind of informal moments or on the bus or wherever the different backstage on the campaign stop. That's actually going to come out. It's already coming out, a lot of these. Video chats, we're going to be talking about that, but like Hillary's example of how you're starting to interact through video with live audiences. Right now it's through text-based kind of responses from people, but ultimately that could easily be done, although not that easily since our YouTube experiment broke down here. But we'll be able to kind of do that through two-way video chats. And ultimately this thing is about events that live on. I mean, normally you think about when people organize, they put all this effort into a local event, right, for a campaign or something. And the local people come and maybe or maybe not to get covered, and it's kind of that's it. Well, if you have video there from your campaign or from your supporters, these things last for months and months and months, and people from all over the country can take part. Again, another category that's happening. The second big area, and this is the last kind of cluster we're going to talk about here, is a different kind of video that we really haven't seen before. And this is essentially those that are rooted in user-generated, bottom-up, kind of the more out-of-control video that is not within the purview of campaigns. That's not within the control of traditional political campaigns. And these, in fact, in some respects, are among the most popular, the most powerful, and ultimately the most kind of interesting for politics to have to understand how to do. And again, we've got someone who's going to talk to us about that a little bit later today. And so some of the ways we think about that, they're starting to see contests, user-generated contests where people, they say, hey, a bunch of supporters come together, try to put together your little commercials, and we have a little contest to get the best to rise to the top. Move on, innovated in that space. We're going to see a lot more of that. Gotcha videos, that macaca thing, you're going to see ubiquity of people covering the candidates, catching them in odd moments. This is a thing that we're going to see a lot more of. Opposition research videos. We've got Greenwald has come up with, there's a very great one, and again, I don't have the time to kind of go into all these sidetracks here, but he actually caught McCain talking about how easily it was going to be done to kind of roll through Iraq and actually solve this roll in quick time, which is they got living forever in video from about 4 years ago. And they juxtaposed it dramatically with his statements now about how he always knew it was long and hard and it was going to be an extremely difficult thing to get out of this war. And it kind of just shows you, boom, right in front of everybody, and then virally travels over the web. Oppo research. Flash animation. This is essentially not really video in the same way, but it's essentially cartoons. These are essentially a software that allows you to do things like through animation that you couldn't do through just filming real people, even real actors or real campaign people. And this is like Jib Jab, the old classic one where you saw the Bush and Kerry singing "This Land Is My Land," that kind of thing. You're going to see a lot of that. This is, again, very easy to do at some level for those that know. And ultimately, you're going to see all these television clips like the Colbert Correspondents Club, or ads like Michael J. Fox's ad in support of stem cell research that would have been, seen by a smaller group or in some kind of circumscribed audience. But now with the web, they can go boom. They can go all over the world. They can come to again and again and again. They can gather all this kind of energy behind it. Those are going to go crazy. And ultimately, there's a final category here called what we're calling web features. And this is a more longer category that will actually be able to allow you to do 5-minute, 10-minute, longer pieces, not full documentaries, but that'll actually give you some depth and some deep kind of way you can get these a little bit with more depth. One of the ones I love the best here is a group in Berkeley actually did a documentary from the future, 2050, in which they looked back. They filmed as though they were in the future. They looked back on how we solved climate change. And in 5 minutes, walked through the steps the American public and the American Congress did to actually do this. Very, very powerful thing. It takes 5 minutes, but it's quite worth seeing.